Welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
Reed.
And on today's podcast, we talked to Aaron Maas. And Aaron is, Reed. I got his name right and I was all excited about that.
He's VP of Multifamily Operations at Origin.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, which I keep calling owner, or at least internally I kept calling ownership, but he used a different word around not asset management. Was it investment?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. That would make sense. Yeah, they're not, a standard ownership group for sure. They obviously putting funds out there and they're on their third, which that in itself, not to spoiler alert here, but that was a really interesting thread right off the bat, just about how they're thinking about their funds as they're looking ahead and what investors are calling for. Yeah, I was most impressed though with the fact you got his last name right out of the gate. That just doesn't happen. So
I don't know that he gave me the same amount of credit.
Yeah. Well, it's not the same as Schlotsky's or something, one of my favorite sandwich joints. I think I told you that story when my very first sales job was selling. I was
going to bring it up when you said go for it.
Yeah. Was selling like, at the time, I think it was like HBO 6, 7, and 8, it was before satellite had really hit and, the cable companies just were feasting on, all it was the same programming recycled at different time slots. And they were still trying to get people to pay for that. So I was, one of the many suckers that, got on a headset and tried to schlep this stuff. And I got, tasked with some zip code. Funny enough, I feel like it was in Alabama, if I have that right, but it was all Polish, and they force you to read directly off of a script. And the supervisor literally comes up over your shoulder to make sure you're not ad-libbing, which you know as well as anybody now that's my tendency. So to have me reading like a robot and then stick me with these Polish zip codes. And then you have to say the name like 8 times in the first 3 paragraphs because you're trying to build, I'll do your air quotes, rapport. And so I would just butcher the hell out of those things. And I can only imagine if you were sitting behind me or next to me trying to do the same thing. So it's good enough or bad enough, I should say, that even one of us was was calling those poor people. But that pretty much at that point told me I would never be in sales ever again. And lo and behold, I made a career out of it.
Yeah. Well, it's, I would be terrible at that. I remember the scripts that they gave me at Verizon when I started, and it did have the name in there, but I just luckily ignored it, and they weren't sitting over my shoulder, like wondering if I was following the script or not. And that's a good thing because I would have been I was already nervous. I mean, I was already like pit sweating at this, like trying to dial people thinking I was going to burn the lead. And it's like, no, there's a million of them out there. You don't have to worry about this. I thought it was super interesting talking to Aaron to get their perspective. We spent the first, 40 minutes talking more about the way that they operate and the way that they consider who they use as a property management company, how they design what fund and why their funds have different strategies, and just generally picking the brain from closer to the ownership than we have before, which is something, well, both of us I know are eager to just get more schooled up on, but it's been hard to find a good resource, and Aaron is terrific in that area.
Yeah, he's great. And I loved hearing his kind of backstory and just framing things as far as you could say his generation. He's been in it a little over a decade from what I remember. And he was just saying, started with feet on the ground, just being a property manager and in a way being your own boss. As long as you have the right people around you, that's really how it feels in the industry. And then there's just a natural progression if you keep sticking with it. And obviously connect with the right folks. So he had a good balance also, I think, between like kind of portfolio sizes, and has definitely had some different experiences based on who he's been working with or for. But right now, I think he couldn't be in a better spot. And he seems to feel the same way. We have a lot of respect for the Origin investment group, and they're doing a lot of great things. And it was also cool to hear that they're building out some of their own technology, which I think we were saying we might try and get a follow-up with him on at some point.
Yeah, I'll push out that email here later today. The yeah, I thought it was interesting that he was describing that they're kind of almost like the specialists that parachute in and try new things versus leaning on the management company to do that. And it seems like that's actually I mean, I'm reading between the lines, but it seems like that's where he takes the most joy. He's like, look, on this side of the table, you can kind of spend your time however you feel like spending it. And then he kept hitting innovation and that type topic. So it seems like they're all sort of, and it makes sense based on our conversations. Like we'll spend hours on the phone with them, just talking through how they think about marketing, and they're just asking really deep questions. Which now we've learned he wants to do kind of a follow up with us so that he can put us in the hot seat.
Yep. Well, I think that comment was grounded in the fact that they have typically a longer term goal or vision and journey, as far as their clients and their goals. So that enables I don't want to say free thinking, but just more of that innovation, taking some calculated risks. He mentioned failing forward, 2 or 3 times. And I think that's a great, perspective for an investment group like that. They're not looking to turn things typically, in just a few months. Although obviously there are the 2 use cases of the short term, holds or whatever, the 2-year versus the 10. But I just, if you do have kind of a longer vision or a longer, path, then why not take some risks? Why not, try to introduce some new tech or ideas? And the more that they get to know the industry, and they do know it extremely well, and they're now starting, like you said, ask great questions around marketing, the better suited they're going to be to do more of those testing and kind of expand their horizons into different verticals within the multifamily industry.
Well, I guess the final thing I have before I'll see if you have final intro thoughts as this becomes a miniature episode. But I love how he was saying how much they're a student of. Well, they're just a constant student. They're like, we're learning new stuff every week, and definitely seems to be the right approach, right? Because we tried to get at what his secret sauce is, or what makes them different. And, he was cagey in some areas there, right? And I get it, wants to keep his secrets, but in a way, well, it just shows you like you start in one. They've started and they've learned the operations asset management side of the business really well. And now they're getting down, if you just think of line item by line item, they're now down towards the bottom of the list and looking at marketing, right? And they're now challenging those. And then he already dropped nuggets throughout the episode about customer lifecycle, retention, and other things where it's like, great, now he's going to go back up the chain. So it's kind of like this pendulum swing as far as how they're going through the different areas of the business, and then just continually challenging them.
Yeah, no, I think you said it well. And we're certainly behind them as far as time in the industry. But as you said, we're super interested in getting schooled up in this side of the business. So I think, he sees the parallel there. And it'd be fun for us to kind of intersect at points, between marketing and operations and the financial side of things. So I hope to stay good partners with him for a long time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, if any of that sounds interesting, then listen on. I think we went like an hour and 15 minutes on this one, so it's a good one. But it was hard to stop the conversation. I know I ended up pushing 2 meetings back because of it. And it sounds like we'll have a follow up with Aaron later on because, well, he's fun to talk to and he's got some questions of his own. So stay tuned. Yeah. Okay, Reed. So we're here with Aaron. Aaron, I should have asked, like, you pronounce your last name as Maas?
Nailed it.
Wow. Look at that, Reed. I got one right for once.
Yeah, very rare. I almost think it's ominous that you actually got a last name right.
Yeah, I know. I have like a check mark board over here of every time I get it right, and Aaron's the first one. Aaron, before we sort of dive into what we're talking about today, why don't you just give us a little bit of your background? I'll just stop there. Give us a little bit of your background.
So I'm in multifamily operations. I've been in the business for over 10 years, and have worked for small owner managers, the management arm of a hedge fund, and now the asset management or investment management team, as we like to call it, for a real estate investment firm out of Chicago, Origin Investments.
Yeah. So we're excited to have you on the show, Aaron, because as we were just saying before we hit record, that we've enjoyed working with you guys for the past, I don't know, number of months, because previously we had some, small tangential like touches with ownership or investment companies, but it's not, we haven't been able to get really deep relationships with any there. And so it's been hard for us to kind of learn, through the grapevine when we're talking with a marketing manager, like, well, what does the owner think, or what does the owner care about, or what's important to them? And you guys are the first ones that we've gotten pretty deep into with, and it's been really valuable for us just to learn, as Reed was just saying, like the vernacular that you guys use, like what's important for you, and then just how you think about the business. So it's been really valuable for us. And so Reed thought it would be great to bring you guys on the show and just just pick your brain a little bit. So Reed, I'll let you tee up where you want to take the conversation.
Well, beyond getting a different perspective, I think one of the things owners and investors in this industry in particular, which we're also just touching a little bit on before we went live, was that they're often, I guess, criticized or used as I don't want to say an excuse, because I think there's a reality to some of it, but that's a big part of what's holding back digital marketing in this industry. And it is that it's, you have a lot of legacy, leadership and folks that, feel like they know, well enough how to manage that. And so they are not super eager to embrace new technology, new ways of looking at things. And this isn't to blow smoke at you, Aaron, or at Origin, but as we said, I mean, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation if you guys weren't kind of an outlier in a good way. But I'm curious, based on your experience having over a decade, if you think there's some truth to that, as to why this industry doesn't seem as far along as some of the other kind of macro categories that are out there. So that might be a good jumping off point. I think it's worth it, David, though, just to quickly, and I don't know, Aaron, you'd probably be better suited to do this than me, but we've mentioned Origin a couple of times, and we'll get a little bit more into your direct path to that company. But anything else you want to highlight as far as Origin before we kind of dive in?
No, I think kind of the other perspective we add is that we're interested and involved in new development as well as previously value add and stabilized communities. So with our different funds, we've got different strategies. And so the marketing campaigns, kind of this income and expense ratio changes, all trying to achieve a similar return, but the techniques change per the style of the community. And that's why this flexibility and knowledge and perspective conversations like this are so valuable, because our partnerships change along with the style of the community. So we're trying to be a very flexible group, and that's probably why we're innovative, because that creativity begets creativity. And so we can use the skills and experiences from a value add and apply it to a new development sometimes. But some of those skills we have to recognize aren't transferable as well.
That's actually super interesting.
All right. Well, David, this was going to somewhat, I mean, I don't know if we're going backwards, but I just wanted to hear a little bit more about how you got into the industry. Aaron, you've been in it a decade, and I don't know, hopefully you can think back that far, but what initially brought you into multifamily?
I think like many property managers, it's the ability to manage a small business as your own. And so that's what we have fun doing. You get to, you have ownership of your budget of this physical asset, right? And a pretty big customer base. So whether you're interested in finance for the day, you want to spend an hour on marketing, or hang out with your customers and make contact with them, you can really split up your day however you see fit, and evolve your own little business. And then you get to stack it up. Your successes are instantly defined with your peers, right? We've got market surveys, you've got the portfolio roll up. You can, if you like winning, this is an opportunity to win in the number of different categories. And so you are your own leader. And if you've got good support and supervisors and leaders above you, you will grow. And that's what's so much fun about this industry, is watching people that were boots on the ground with me 10 years ago, or just their VPs in various places around the country. They're division leaders, directors. So this industry has also taken leaps and bounds in the last 10 years, 12 years, right? So you can find young people in this industry that will show you the paper ledger that they were keeping track of people's rents on when they started, right? And today, now they're vetting which of the resident facing apps do they want to use so that people can not only pay their rent, enter their work orders, but also like send notes about pool parties. So we've come a long way. That's what keeps us in the industry, is that we've been able to evolve along with it. And everyone's learning. For the last 12 years, we've all been learning every day.
Oh, super, well, cool. And I'll say, dare I say, inspiring answer. Now, I mean, I'm already in the industry, but I didn't come about it the way that you did, but it sounds a lot of fun the way you're describing it, from the beginning, like being a property manager. And funny enough, when you're talking about penciling things in, it made me think that you guys like line up with fantasy football when people were like doing their scores in newspapers, it's changed quite a bit, and certainly multifamily and tech has, which we're going to hit pretty hard here in just a bit. And David, I'll flip it over to you just after this, but I think, we almost have to start here. The current climate, kind of the world's upside down right now. And so curious to know, and I think I read on one of the LinkedIn posts from Origin that it was incredibly brave, I guess, and responsible, but that you guys did walk quite a few deals. I want to say it was either in March or April, because you just didn't think that, it made sense given the current situation. I don't know what else was behind that, or if I even have that right, but just curious to get your kind of, I guess, macro thoughts on what's going on in the industry, but in the world, and then how's that affecting you guys?
Yeah, good question. I mean, in March, there was a lot on the table. And that wasn't just a big March letdown. That was 6 months, 12 months, years in the making. And so it's really difficult after you've put in all the work and dug into all the fundamentals to walk away from something that, was so close to being your newborn. And that decision was made back in March. And then, we really watched activity die. Things were near tragic, right? March, April, May. And, you're asking, some data points will tell you made the right decision, and then others will make you question it. But we're happy to report this. Deal activity has really picked up in the last 4 weeks. 100 times what it was in April and May. So a robust return of activity. And the current asks are pretty similar to the pre-COVID pricing. So, we recognize rents are down. You're hearing reports maybe 5% or more, plus concessions, right? So however you want to net that in. But there's adjustments to cap rate and financing that's creating pretty similar returns within 50 to 100 bips, maybe reduction to pre-COVID, but, kind of inspiring us to get back in the mix. And so our acquisitions team has not stopped. They've been exploring opportunities every day since, and doing a lot of benchmarking, right? Continuing to study the path of those old deals to determine, where that went. And so, whereas we may not be, we may be happy to not be caught holding the bag on some of those, like we're happy to fail forward, right? If timing's everything, and there will be new deals. And so we're focusing on that, and that's where we spend our energy. So, all in all, like, we're still bringing things to the table. The investment committee is meeting probably on a weekly basis to discuss opportunities.
Well, that's great to hear. We've said several times, and we're always looking at predominantly, of course, from a marketing lens, but just that there's always winners and losers through these types of crisis. And, it is often, or does, force innovation and, different types of strategy. And so, we're curious to see, obviously we're right in the middle of it, or you could say at the beginning, unfortunately, how things are going to shake out. But definitely encouraging to hear that the deals are still happening and, have picked up quite a bit, and that you guys still see the possibility for some really good returns. So that's great to hear. David, before I just go on and on, do you want to jump in?
No, I love that you talked hedgehog, and then Aaron, as you're saying, like, you guys pulled back, but now you're getting back into it. It leads me a couple different ways. One is how man, I say, I want to know kind of almost like how you evaluate deals to then say like, what from a current deal do you guys feel like you're going to bring to the table? Like, let's say it's a current stabilized asset. Why would you go after that? You must have some, I'll say, secret sauce internally that you believe like, now we can take this asset and it's valued at X, Y, or Z, but we believe that we're going to be able to do this to even push it further, let's say beyond what the normal market would bear, right? Because the returns, at least that I had seen on your funds, were like 24% for the prior funds, which are pretty awesome. And so then, just curious what the secret sauce is, because you guys must go to market advertising that to investors, right? Like, hey, here's what we're going to do and here's why we're going to win. And then I'm wondering kind of to talk about past, present, future, as far as like what that means based on the new sort of world that Reed's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't give you the recipe.
No, but there must be some stuff that you market, right? As you go and raise your fund, like this is why you would park your cash with us. So I'm just not asking you to. Joya did the same thing. Joya was like, I'm not going to give you all of my tricks, but just, what you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, I think, and Joy sits in these rooms too, with owners and investors, and I mean, it's a 1 hour conversation, wouldn't commit enough time to it. So we talked about Jim Collins earlier, and I think it's Atul Gawande has the checklist manifesto, and he speaks to a investor in California who has an incredibly robust checklist, right? He basically puts every deal through this checklist. And if any of these points of failure, then that's when they dig in, right? And it's not a success necessarily that they dig into, but also the failures, right? So where do things look really good? Let's explore that. Where do things not look so good? Let's explore that, right? Because there's this issue of whether success is because or despite the market or the company or the owner, right? And that's what we are. I would say we're incredibly principled. We run every opportunity through the same standards. We stack up a lot of data points. We're creating our own like AI business intelligence tool that's going to stack up everything from a walk score to a rent to the demographics and national movement into that area to the balance sheet of the state, right? And so again, we're going to rely on these checklists, which aren't to replace people or creativity, but it helps us highlight the areas of need or highlight the areas that are super attractive, and just study them up quick. Make sure that it's not a flash in the pan, right? Where the rents are looking really strong because you're the newest, coolest thing and no one else is moving to that town, right? That property just recaptured the same 200 tenants that were previously across the street, and there's no actual growth. And even, considering the same thing in a suburban market. So without kind of just the short answer being we're incredibly principled, I would say also that we have people in our own backyard, right? So we've got offices in Denver and Charlotte and Atlanta and Chicago, and we're trying to walk the tour path, right? Get comfortable with the owners, the other managers in that area, make sure that we have all the relationships to ask the questions that we need answers to, and get them not only from these data points, but also people's experience, like right there in that neighborhood.
Yeah, well, I love the way that you answered that, because it reminds me kind of if someone comes to us with their campaigns and they're like, hey, I'm not, would you guys be willing to take over this campaign? And we'll start with an audit, right? And that audit is effectively this thorough checklist that you talk about. And then depending on how that audit shoots out, it's like, well, tell me about your goals. Because if their goals are to flip this property in 3 months, depending on how that audit comes out, we may not be able to help them improve on what they're doing over a 3-month period. But if given a 12-month period, we have extreme confidence that our nimbleness and the way that we engineer our campaigns are going to win out over an annual. But within a quarter, maybe we wouldn't quite get there. So I'm kind of, that's how I'm going to relate it to I guess the way that we do business. So then my next thing that I've been itching to get an answer to, but you guys have deals all over the country because you're looking at, you've got these checklists, right? And you determine that, okay, let's do a deal in whatever, Boise, and let's do one in Atlanta. And then, however, you guys haven't chosen to go with a national management company in every case. Like you guys will choose different management companies depending on the deal. So walk me through that. Why did you guys decide to use many different management companies? And then how do you go through the selection process?
Great question. It's a question that we've been asked before, and we ask ourselves sometimes. So I'll try to keep this one short too. We actually, I'm going to borrow this one from Reed. Right, this is the matrix, right? Your vendor matrix idea. So we have a manager matrix, and there's over 30 topics. I mean, this is very involved. If you're on the phone with us and you're pitching us as a management company, like bring a coffee and a Snickers, because we got a lot to get through. So, like, Reed mentioned this before, and I'm not. They didn't ask me to get subscribers to the Digible Dudes podcast, but the follow up question is so important, right? When someone touts their own accolade and say we're really good at technology, okay, like what do you do to foster that, right? Or our people, okay, what do you do to foster that? Because if people is the answer and those 4 players leave for whatever reason, they all win the lottery, right? Your people culture is gone. If technology, because we plugged this program in that is a wonderful stack product, it's cutting edge, that you stumbled upon at AIM, right? Like that's great, but technology changes, and that'll be different in a month. It'll be certainly different in a year. So making sure that these companies align with our values, right? And would it be easier at times to be partnered with a giant group that covers all of our bases in multiple arenas, whether that's geographically or technology and reporting, right? Like all of these facets that are so important, that would certainly, create another structure that would ease some of our pains, right? This reporting regurgitation. But there's also difficulty in that because we want autonomy, right? And that's got to be the hottest friction point between an owner and a manager. Is that most organizations are going to achieve their efficiency by standardizing processes. That's just like, my prior role with Steadfast, we really explored this. There's a huge deep dive into just each process, and people were assigned to like the minutia, right? To get the most juice for the squeeze out of these opportunities, right? These action items that everyone experiences in property management. And so once that's done, there's the deep dive, there's the training, there's the integration. There are a lot of players involved. And so when an owner wants to do something new, the user isn't the person with the login, right? It's the IT department. It's their training department teaching this person, and it's their regional manager or the VP who's supervising the process and studying that reporting. So like they don't like that. It's difficult for us, right? It's a much higher hurdle than us just saying, look, we'll pay the bill. We really want to use this marketing or market survey tool. It works well for us, right? So we need to be cognizant of that and respectful of that, and recognize that their efficiency and success was because of the path that they laid out for themselves. And they're really good at it, and their path is, well traveled. And so we want to, get on board where we can. So, that's not to say we won't also absolutely explore a salt of the earth, mom and pop, for lack of a better word, firm as well, right? Because if they are in a market that we're in and that property aligns with what they do, they can cover a lot of our bases as well. And maybe we can introduce them to some technology or be the first owner they've worked with that has the willingness to fail forward and to try something new, and we'll shoulder a lot of that onboarding and go through the experience with them. And I think that would be something that's pretty different at Origin than many other firms, is that, and David, this, is that we will absolutely sit on a call, right, with a revenue manager or a marketing team or a new software application. Like we'll be on the onboarding call and the training calls, the monthly reporting. We want to be there with you. We don't need you to tell us something's not working because we already heard it. Right. And you're not going to have to ask us for something you need because we already know. So in that regard, we very much enjoy staying in the weeds with the managers and making sure that they know this is a partnership, not a business and customer relationship, and help maybe create efficiencies at the same time as we're creating roadblocks to their efficiencies. But yeah, it's difficult. It's a good question. And we ask ourselves that like a monthly basis. Like, wouldn't this just be easier if all the reports look the same, right? But we've grown accustomed to regurgitating, slicing and dicing and getting what we need from what they do. And they're good at what they do. And so I'm not sitting here saying we're trying to get a management partner we can change. But that adaptation, I think it's healthy for us to learn from some groups and carry it over, chew the meat and spit out the bones.
Yeah, well, if I just project a little bit, well, a couple things. One is having your hands in multiple management companies allows you guys to stay kind of on top of new trends in tech, right? Because you can get kind of blindsided if you're just stuck with one group. Reed and I say that all the time. Like, it doesn't always make sense to have all your marketing even with one company, because you just don't know what someone else is trying out, and then it just gives you a diverse look. But if I'm projecting a little bit, it sounds like what you're saying is, look, some of those national firms do are great because it's standardized, and some of that sometimes they'll win on rate, sometimes they'll win on stack, but really you guys value some of the specialists within each market, and even within some of those big companies, each regional or even I'll just say each region might do things slightly differently. And so, you may use, I don't even know, I'm just going to say a Lincoln somewhere, right? Because you align with those folks in the way that they do business. But in a different region, it may not make sense for that deal, or with the way that particular region manages their assets. Is that fair?
More than fair. I think Lincoln, if you ask them today, they would say our regions operate like independent businesses. So yeah, leveraging the scale to get best rate, wonderful, but also recognizing that they require some autonomy, that their people and process might be different in their region. And leadership has different styles. I think you would want that, right? Like, you want the leader to be able to operate within their style, and be successful there. So yeah, I think the big companies have that going on as well. And whether it's a challenge or a benefit, I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, the big companies, you're only as good as the boots on the ground. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter which company you go with. Like, your property manager matters more than like the 65 people between them and the top, right? If that person's smiling and engaging, and the residents like them, and their staff likes working there, and they've got an eye for detail, like, you're done, right? Like I'll pay an extra $10 for my the coffee machine or whatever it is. Like, we've got the right people, you'll have a good product.
Yeah, so before we get into marketing, and Reed may have a follow-up, but I'm just curious about the life cycle. So obviously it's not all on rate, right? Like, we learn that all the time. Like, people don't pick marketing companies because of rate. Rates certainly is something they can squeeze you on, but it's more than that. So well, I'm wondering about almost like the pitch cycle, because I'm guessing you guys get pitched all the time that, like, hey, we should be taking, this management company should take over from that management company. But I've never been able to talk to somebody about that. So is your door just getting hammered constantly with people trying to pitch their services instead, or is this industry more way, in some cases I know it's way more relationship based, but where it's less of like a Shark Tank out there, and it's more about, hey, when we're ready, we'll come looking, but don't come to us. So I'm just curious how that sort of flows.
Combination of both. We like to talk shop, and we'll dive into a market, and our acquisitions team will meet the managers in that market, or there are a lot of owners out there with management arms. So we might be discussing deal flow with one team, and they'll make an introduction to their management team, right? Because we're all, we kind of meet the family sort of thing. And so we love talking shop. We will absolutely get on the horn with anybody who calls us and talk their ideas, talk about our ideas, and get to know each other. So I'd say we consider that more than a pitch. Yeah, there's a recent transition that just happened that probably everyone in the industry is aware of. And that really brought people out, and had to get people knocking on our door. And, I expect that'll be the case with any transition, but we're always happy to hear from these partners. And I think, like, even in a 30-minute phone call, we can learn from each other. And if things align, like, those decisions are a lot easier to make, or we can start working our way through that matrix. And otherwise, it's just good to know people who are going to be in your markets, because you never know who's going to change and what's going to move. And I don't know, I think just kind of the networking is probably strong for the industry. So people aren't pounding down our door. We're not hanging up on phone calls. We're happy to hear from them, but there are, other managers that are probably a little bit more consistent in their communication with us. And so we feel a little bit closer to them.
Yeah. All right. I do have one more follow-up. When it comes to property management companies, you had mentioned about the people are so important, right? And a lot of that is because a management company, they have to keep their expenses low. So and I'm sure some people would take issue with this. I often think of a third-party manager as almost outsourced HR. Like you're hiring some other company to handle like the hiring, the education, the whatever of these people, this talent, because their margins are slim as a third-party manager. You don't make, I mean, I know you guys probably think the fees are outrageous, but it's not a ton in fees and margin at the end of the day. And so they can't invest in a lot of hard assets. And they're mostly investing in people. And so I'm going back to you guys on I'll say the owner investor side, but is it a similar setup where it's more, I mean, you mentioned that you guys are building an AI, so I haven't taken that bait yet, but I definitely want to learn more there. But is it more that you guys are headcount versus like hard assets and things? And I'll give one more quick example, but going back to the venture capital companies, that oftentimes they'll be running like a $50 million, $100 million fund, and it'll be like 2 people, 3 people. They just don't have much headcount, and they don't have much assets because they're trying to keep expenses low, and then they rely on just being able to deploy the capital and monitor it. So yeah, just wondering what you can give us there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think what you're lending yourself to is like, why don't we integrate, right? Why don't we build out kind of a management group and take that on? And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ton of reasons in there. Is it kind of it might cloud our judgment. It's harder to wheel up and then wheel down, right? A group. But to your initial point, I think what speaks loud and clear to me is these third-party managers do have a lot of overhead. They've got the HR issues, the hiring, the customers, the resident retention. They've got fires to put out on a daily basis. And that's why we believe it's a good partnership. While they're doing that, we are very happy to take on new initiatives, to be a part of this creative process, to get outside the box a little bit. You can pick your head up one day and all of a sudden the quarter's gone, right? And none of those initiatives, none of the things you talked about during budget season have even been started. And with no reason, but there were bigger problems, bigger fish to fry. So I think it's a good partnership. If we allow them to manage the people, right? And we have good people managing other good people, they're going to have a successful path there. And meanwhile, we can concentrate on the marketing or technology, the investors' needs, the ROI. Like we can change those and tweak those programs in the background so that everybody's successful without burdening their time, or without taking them away from a resident or an employee, an associate that needs some energy, so that they can go think about some countertop purchase, right? Like we'll work together with them so they can focus on the people and we can kind of focus on the product.
Yeah, well, I really like some of what you're saying. It's back to Reed's hedgehog. Like you guys can be the best at what you do. If you win in the third party, then that's a whole nother it's a whole nother game. Or what owner operated, that's a whole nother game. And that allows them to sort of, you can find someone that's stable, that's doing some really good to overuse an analogy, but blocking and tackling. And then you guys can come through and kind of play the specialist on and dabbling with these other experiments and stay close to it. Because frankly, you're the ones that get to green light those things anyways. So it's kind of easier for you guys to run those experiments and then let them handle sort of the day-to-day. Well, Reed, I know I've gone on for a while, so I know we need to get at marketing at some point, but anything else you want to cover before there?
Yeah, I was going to take the bait on the AI tool. I thought that's super interesting. So, and I had a question just kind of at large, how Aaron was feeling about tech and data within the industry. And you got kind of the fintech sector of it. And then you have the on-site, the property technology. And then, of course, what we're bringing to the table and some other folks, as far as disrupting on the marketing front. But I actually, as you guys were talking through things, it made me think about one of the questions we asked Joya. So I'm going to ask Aaron the same thing about alignment. So as you guys were talking about having more of a diverse approach, at least right now, with all the different third-party management companies you guys work with, but then putting them through kind of, I don't want to say the ringer, but that matrix, and seeing how they align. What about expectations when it comes to what a third party believes is realistic versus what you guys feel is realistic? Is that frequently pretty close, or and then how much of a factor does that play into your decision? Because you might get pretty far down the road with a third party management company, and then it's like, here are our goals, and they say time out. We know this market, that's totally unrealistic. And then you guys, potentially say, well, that's not going to work for us, and we're going to have to now move down the road and look at other third-party management companies. I just have to believe that you're not always aligned. And so I think what I was asking Joy is typically, are you guys part of the process, with these development groups, or are you guys just beholden to what they tell you? And then you have to reverse engineer a plan to get to that number. So how collaborative is it? And talk to us a little bit more about how aligned you are with these third-party management companies.
Yeah, that's great. I'll try to unpack that a bit. It's we're very involved, which may mean overbearing depending on what position you're in. And our life cycle to this is 4, 5, 6, 10 years, right? And so whereas a strategy might be quarterly, or a business plan might be an annual budget, we're trying to achieve something in the distance, right? It at times feels, I'm imagining, to the on-site team, like we're keep moving the goalpost. That kind of what you're discussing is this alignment, right? Or are we changing the rules? But it's, different strategies or different motivations. So yeah, I don't want to get off track on that. But yeah, I think sometimes we have to recognize that there's a short-term budget that it can become very achievable, but at the same time, that's not good or bad. You have to benchmark against the market, right? You've got to have a bigger data set there. So before we are all going to be upset that we missed our mark on rents, right? And we can start pointing fingers at, right, the deal team that put together the pro forma, or the on-site team, or the marketing team, or the revenue management tool, right? There are a lot of players. That delta was created by a lot of players. We have to look outside of our box and recognize, have rents compressed in the whole area? Did a few products come online that we weren't anticipating, right? Things that weren't in front of us when we first kind of pounded pavement a year ago, and now the market fundamentals have changed. So it's important to us that we benchmark in the market and to other companies, including big and small. It's also important to us that our third-party managers do that. So it's not good enough to say we achieved savings over last year. Same store is it's important, right? Revenue growth and expense savings, but it's not everything, right? If there's a property across the street doing it better or worse, then that's important to our decision making and should be considered. So I kind of say it's not as much that I love winning, but I hate losing. And you don't know if you're losing unless you look back at the competition or look forward, right? So those KPIs, we've got one tool that we use on the management side, and then we're building one in the background. But the idea there, right, is that we can study what's going well for other people, because it might be due to us or not due to us, and we want to give everyone an equal share of the credit.
Yeah, well, that really resonates with me. Context is king, right? We say that all the time when we're really up, with some campaigns. It's let's not chest bump yet. Let's look at the rest of the market, and let's look at the comps and see if we're actually we should be celebrating. So you did mention the tool now a couple times. To the extent you're willing, we'd love to hear more about that. But that connects, I guess, with just this general question: is how do you grade the technology and data right now? From your point of view and origins. I was thinking almost in terms of Moneyball, the way you were talking about where things were 10 years ago and where they are now, and yourself is, you're the new generation, right? That, is leading and helping with this transition, I'd say, from kind of a legacy thought process or approach to one that is way more data driven and is leveraging a lot of new technology to get there. So what are your thoughts about where things stand today in multifamily, and then whatever else you'd be willing to include about what you guys are developing?
Yeah, for sure. Great. And we can say what we're developing for another chat. That's programming mostly for the acquisition side. It's kind of star reporting for any property anywhere, or just dirt, right? So you could apply the same program to just a square in the middle of middle of a city, and you could evaluate it, right? You could punch in the numbers. What happens if we put 150 units here? And so, that's our front end strategy. To the back end, things have changed a lot. We have benchmarking, KPIs, roll ups, integrations that never existed before. they came with a lot of growing pains, right? We stand on the shoulders of the giants that went before us. And so 10 years ago or 5 years ago, someone started down this process and they were banging their head on the wall because the integration was broken or the data was wrong. And now I don't trust it. And it costs lots of money and time and resources. And thank you to the people who went through that, because it's better today. Is it perfect today? Absolutely not. We're still missing so many key metrics, right? The person who spends time in our office, who actually uses our amenities, who responds to our emails, like we don't know the difference between a good resident and a bad resident other than the fact they pay rent or don't, right? Like we just don't. That's not rolling into our decision making right now. I know we're kind of angling back towards marketing, and it's everyone makes these claims of first touch lead attribution, and we can track it now, and this is how they got there. And I'm going to get off topic a bit, but it's this virtual leasing agent on your website, and that's how you got the lease. And it's like, well, no, they found their way to the website. How can you possibly give the responsibility to this thing when something else got them there, right? It's complicated. There's a lot of players in this. And so as we develop out the ways that things can play nice, they can work together, we can scrub the data and collect it. Data was the big word a couple of years ago at NAA. It's evolved a little bit since then. It still has its flaws, but we're getting there. It's an industry thing, and we were behind the times. It's coming. And I think as much as we're watching companies get rolled up into other companies, and that's frustrating because we feel like we lose that leverage and autonomy in some of those personal relationships. Where you do benefit is finding your data being housed by one place where there are fewer things to break, and you can actually start leveraging some of those actions together. So we're getting there. We're loving it. We're happy for it. It helps us make decisions without our heart being in it. And we're always giving ourselves the opportunity to talk with the team and say, where are we wrong? This is what the data is pointing out. Where are we wrong? And we're happy to adapt and improvise. But yeah, I mean, that's a great conversation that we're having. That's probably 80% of the National Apartment Association conference is based around how do you make your decisions based on data and not lose the customer touch, the resident experience in the mix, right? Not make all of your decisions based on data. But how can you spin the minutia to say, this unit turns and leases faster for whatever reason than any other unit. You wouldn't know it. You've got 500 on your property, but this one, is leasing faster. It's got more value. It just does, right? Or this type of resident's a stickier resident. They just renew more. The people that do this renew more, period, right? I think I just read something yesterday. It's that Zigo published. It was 30% higher retention from people who have a friend in the community, right? All right, that's my third quarter campaign, is make a friend, right? Like that's what we're going to start doing now. We're going to start playing matchmaker or something, which will be super tricky in the COVID environment. So wish me luck. But it's those things, like what can we tweak to just get the most out of every one of these data points? And it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. Well, this is I think will be a much quicker response, and not just meaning that we will get to marketing next. But are you guys considering productizing this tool that you're developing, or is that something that you're just going to keep in house for?
Oh, that'll be our baby for a while, I imagine. It's been a lot of work and will continue to be a lot of work, but what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and other people are doing this too. So you never know what you might find when you kind of open your doors to things. You might have people who can compare product and tech. Mm-hmm. So once we are the masters of our own domain, I imagine we'll be much more likely to want to discuss it with people.
Yeah, makes sense. We kind of see things the same way right now with Fiona. All right. Well, yeah, let's move into marketing. So I think we can still stay, this thread of data and technology. And like we said at the get go, we're not looking to plug ourselves or for you two either. But what is your opinion right now of tech? Within MarTech, ad tech within the industry, and then how do you feel about the data that's coming through? You did mention, it's not simple; it's super complicated, which we agree with. I always call it the Rubik's Cube that nobody's going to solve, and I don't mean to be a pessimist. And we're founders of a company that is trying to, in fact, solve that Rubik's Cube. But I just, for me, I see, my path to lease, literally is probably going to look different if I were to do it today and then start a week later, the whole process, the same process. To me, that's how complex it is, which makes it really difficult, especially when you have, frankly, limited data, when it's just looking at one property, to really start, developing those trends and patterns and then building a technology around that. It's just so dynamic. It's not an excuse to give up, but that's just one component of what makes this so difficult. But I'll let you kind of just general response to what your thoughts are around the MarTech ad tech space and multifamily, and then I'm sure that's going to kind of take you on some level down the data path.
Marketing spend, there's been cost creep in every expense line. There's been a cost multiple in marketing, right? And I think that's probably still blowing our hair back a little bit, to everyone but the marketing director. The VP of marketing at every company understands it, and they need it, and they want it, and they're trying to sign contracts. And I think everyone below, above, and around them are saying, "Whoa, what do you mean it's going to cost? We have a $10,000 a month marketing campaign. Why don't I just give each one of our move-ins $1,000, right? Like, period. It's the same cost to me. I'll just start handing people money." And so it's more evolved than ever. And I think the sideways answer to the question is, you create a culture for your property on your website and in your advertising campaign. And you can't forget that. And your advertising campaign is setting up the resident experience, right? And your retention is based on the move-in experience. And the move-in experience was set up by their shopping experience, right? And you cannot differentiate the three. That's my opinion. You cannot differentiate the three. And so if you want to have, we want our properties to be perfect. We want our residents to have a great experience. And so that requires a good first impression. And that's going to happen during their search. So for that reason, we're willing to spend a little more. Second, you need a wider funnel than ever now. That's just the game we're in. There are a lot of ways to find an apartment, and it's not the same strategy as our past. Like, it's not going to be getting the apartment that's close to your job, or the apartment that's close to your worship, or your grocery store, or your friend, right? It's easy to have a car. It's easy to get a ride. There are places you don't need a car and you don't need a ride. There are so many options. Furniture is easy to get. It's easy to get rid of, right? And that's much due to technology, right? But it comes with a cost. So our buy-in's a little bit higher for us to be a part of, like, this resident or their prospect, their life as it is already. And that's the buy-in, right? That's the cost that it is to exist in their hand every day when they walk around. So we can't expect people to find us without that. And I think we've all been swayed by marketing. Like, there's shoes in our closet and there's tires on our car or something that, marketing got us there. And there's nothing wrong with that. It helped us make decisions that we may not have made on our own. And we just need to be a part of that. So it's really expensive. That's like my comment. My overarching comment is, man, has it gotten expensive. But not even a necessary evil. I would say it's just necessary to culture what you want from your resident and staff the rest of the way through the life cycle.
I have to ask, sorry, Aaron, so marketing is a smaller line item in the budget from what I've been told. So I'll be curious to see if you have some placeholder numbers, and then I'll tell you what I've heard. But then there's also concessions, right? You talk a little bit about specials. So can you give us an idea of it doesn't have to be on your deals. It could just be in general, as far as like how much of a percentage of budget concessions are.
I can't answer it. There are concession markets and markets with no concessions at all. So it's appalling, right? And same with locators. So speaking to marketing, right? You can walk into a market where you've got $20,000 a month locator and you've got a $4,000 a month marketing, right? And vice versa. Concessions in a heavily concessed market, you'll see a big old negative $20,000. And then you'll say, well, we only spent $3,500 on marketing. It's like, well, it's all kind of the same. If you want to roll it up, it's the cost for a lease, right? You roll it all up, you're going to be spending a couple $1,000s to hand someone keys. These are just big numbers for whatever properties, but the comparison holds true. And so that pricing versus marketing, whether it's via concession, the marketing via locator versus web or digital, every market's different, but it's a balancing act. Yeah, it's difficult to know how to spend that money. But I think what you can benefit from is, even at same store, you need to study the good months and the bad months, right? You need to study a month that things worked and were inexpensive, right? You got a bunch of leases without requiring locators, maybe that you weren't pushing very high concessions. Like, what worked? How did we get that flow? and vice versa. When you're just not getting people through the funnel, right, which means locators aren't bringing them there, the concession aren't bringing them there, you have to look at your digital campaign, right? Like the punchline is, to me, like pricing and concessions, no one even has that information unless you have a strong digital campaign. You're never going to get there. So I mean, someone can say, well, we leverage the marketing through our pricing, aggressive pricing. Okay, they still aren't going to find you. If they can't, I mean, if you're not pushing to the top of an apartment list, they'll never know that you're $200 cheaper than your comp. Like sounds like a very difficult strategy to me. So I'm not saying you have to be all in with your digital campaign, but if you're not mindful of it, all those other toggles and levers that you can play with won't work.
Yeah, well, of course, that's exactly what we're trying to figure out, right? Is how much can you save on those other line items, like you're talking about, like concessions or locators or whatever, by doing marketing and vice versa, because we see wildly different swings. So right now, that's the hardest for us. It's almost like the black box of it's the way that the GLs are done. It's not very easy for us when we are provided them to determine, well, how much did you really spend all in to try to get this customer in the door? So that's something we just have to continue to, and I'll steal your word, but unpack over time, and we'll get there. But that just means that there's plenty more to do. All right, Reed, sorry, I jumped in front of you.
No problem. I was going to ask, how much do you associate the expense of marketing, or this, kind of mushroom of expense in marketing, to, I don't want to call it overdevelopment, because if people are moving in, then you can't really call it that. But all the new construction, I see, big relationship there. So part of it's the wider net you're talking about. You can't just put all your money in apartments.com or Google and think that that's enough. You do need to be more diversified. So I appreciate that comment. But then there's also the reality of, like, with all this development, that's diluting leads, and that forces the cost per lead or lease to go up. And that does hit things like Google, where a cost per click 5 years ago in a softer market or with less buildings isn't going to be the same as what it looks like now, because not only are you dealing with more competition, which to me is going to drive marketing, but then you have all these buildings with marketing budgets, and they're pouring more money into the DSPs, the platforms out there that then drive up the auction. So hopefully you're following me, but I'm just curious how much you associate competition driving marketing spend versus.
You trying to tell me we did this to ourselves? Yeah, we did. That's for sure we did. Yeah, so I mean, that's the case on a lease up, right? You need to get every move out in that area to move in to your location. You need to find a way to reach people who are not in that area and get them to move in, that transient employee. So that's required. And with that, so that would be the creep, right? Where there's more and more people moving to the bigger and bigger packages, willing to pay more per click. And so that has snowballed. But, on the flip side of that, I would argue, there are communities that only need 8 move-ins per month to stay 96% occupied. That's all we need, right? So then that cost per lead, as David was mentioning, right? Then that cost per lead starts coming out of balance, right? It's one thing to have to rent 25 apartments a month. It's another thing if you only need 5, 6, 7, 8. So, but those packages look similar, right? Just the cost of playing the game, the cost of having a website, having some virtual tour imagery, being campaigned out in front, plugging into the ILSs that are most searched in your area. There's a cost, right? It's like the entry barrier, and that's grown on us quite a bit now. I'm not saying it's not worthwhile, but it's difficult sometimes to recognize, like, where, again, that lead attribution, it's like what's working and what's not. And so that's what takes some digging in, and everyone's got limited bandwidth. And so you've got only so much energy that you can spend, like, slicing and dicing that information. And it's a little bit murky, right? Like the digital reference point might point you one way, and then you ask the person and they're like, oh, I was driving by, or vice versa. And so, like, there's just going to be murky. And so you just have to kind of trust your campaign. And the last comment I think to that is, and know when to turn off the faucet, right? Like, you've got to know, or be willing to review what's working and what's not, and turn things off that aren't working. It's okay to stop doing something, right? And it's okay to maybe even stop doing something that is working so much and see what the effect of that is. You'll never know if you can achieve savings or spend the money elsewhere. In our company, we like to say, pour gas on it, right? Like if you're getting heat, pour gas on it. Like let's see what works, and then review it and turn it off. So nothing is set it and forget it in our industry, right? But it takes like a certain mindfulness to get there. And when you're a lease up, you're gonna just pour gas on it. And when you only need those 5 leases, it's just that's where you're going to spend more energy. After those leases have keys, you need to review your marketing campaign.
Well, I think pretty close follow up here, but we've seen a lot less, or at least I have, since we've been doing these trade shows, going around and hearing these sessions at NAA and Optech and AIM about retention. And that surprised me when I first, you could say, got into the industry. In a lot of other categories, it seems to me a lot more focus there, but it made sense quickly once I better understood the economics of it, and that you're far more likely in many cases to get somebody outside of the building to pay more, following a lease expiration than that person that was there, because they can go hunt down another concession, right? And I was part of that, and I was the first few years that I was out in the world, I was always looking for a deal, so I was probably a nightmare to deal with. But what is your thoughts or your view about retention as you talk about all that marketing expenditure? And I know this doesn't relate as much to lease ups, but when a property is stabilized, that we're better suited to be putting more money, around retention, whatever that looks like, because it's not simple either, versus still focusing on getting people from, the apartment across the street.
Right, totally. And I'm going to change hats here. So we're investment management, and so we act like operators. But as an owner, I would say there is no cost we're not willing to pay within reason to not have vacancy, right? Like that is you're just bleeding revenue. So whether it's going to cost us X amount of money to get Y amount of retention, let's explore that, right? It costs X amount of money to get a faster move in on the marketing front. Let's explore that. So yeah, retention is everything. That turnover, you may benefit from the lease over lease rent increases. But that's only until that unit's been sitting stale, market conditions change, it takes a downturn, and now you're losing lease over lease, right? And you're asking yourselves, what could I have done to get that last person to stay? And so we regularly review that in our firm, is whether our rent movement matches the vacancy loss. So like, it's not just enough to study lease over lease and same store. You have to ask yourself, but what could have been on the table had that person not moved out? And you won't prevent every move out. There's going to be concession hoppers. There's going to be home purchases, just true blue relocations, like, out of state relocations. That's speaking to me more than ever with this COVID environment, is that you're telling me now I can work from home, right? Like I chose this location because of my commute, and really, truly, all of my friends, family, restaurants, and retail, I chose that because of the commute too, right? As much as I love this neighborhood, if I can go be out in the burbs, I will. Get a little bit more sprawl, a little bit less congestion, whatever your needs are. So creating a sticky resident is everything. And so we want to factor that in as well. But, there's a cost. You can get someone out and move a new person in, but if you're not recognizing that it's much less expensive to not turn a unit, not market the apartment, not sit there on vacancy, and keep that same person there, so much as they're a happy resident and they're building that community culture, I mean, that's the win. That's the win in every category.
Cool. Well, David, did you want to jump in here before I wanted to get into budgeting, just how you guys formulate budgets, marketing budgets specifically, but if you had something that you want.
No, that works. I know we don't have a ton more time, so
yeah. Well, how do you guys approach that now? How much has that changed? I guess over the last few years, we've heard it's $1 per door, and I've heard and dealt with this myself. Like if you have a good year, you get punished, and if you have a bad year, you get rewarded. As far as marketing expenditure, but just walk us through how you guys settle on a marketing budget when you take on a new building.
Yeah. So fortunately, the packages now are pretty unit count independent, right? So other than your software, which is like per unit, most of the packages are going to be unit independent. And so it kind of messes with your rule of averages, the per door costs a little bit, but you've benchmarked how much you're going to spend throughout your portfolio. And then you make a determination at the beginning and you say, with the information that we're given, is this a fire we're pouring gas on, or is this something that kind of cruises along on autopilot and can we kind of set, the mid package level in every category, right? So most of the time in our experience, the management proposal will include all of the offerings, right? Everything from the Zillow, Zumper, wrapping in CRMs and SEO, PPC, Geo, like you just name it, you get your list and all your pricing across, and then you're kind of picking and choosing, right? Or you're running something for 3 months and then turning it off. And at the end of the day, you're just working through some law of averages. And we're never going to consider going over budget in marketing as a failure. And we never consider going under budget in marketing a win, at least not a budgeting win. The win there is that we had higher retention, right? Or that our leasing agents just killing it out front. Like people are just diving through the door just to meet this person and choose to live here. So that's the win. We didn't figure out the budget. We figured out the people. But being flexible in marketing budgets is everything. And if we can get a win when times are good, like I said, if I can turn it off when I'm 96 and then turn it wide open when I hit 91, like that's the flexibility that we need in the marketing. It's not a property management software. It's not detrimental to turn it off for 2 months, right? The marketing campaign isn't what's holding our doors open. And so, if we can dial it up and down, there will be months you go over budget and hopefully months you go under. And we can learn from all of those other communities, right? So because we have autonomy, because we're not making unilateral decisions, all of our properties are on this ILS, on this website provider, this SEO package, we can learn from what's working and what's not. And I think that's the flexibility that really makes us better at how we manage our properties than somebody who has to just, throw a... Yeah, I think that what I was saying is, that the difficulty is trying to
last part, David. I don't know if you did too. The audio cut out.
That when you have a huge portfolio and you've got a good deal on something, you just want to apply that blanket to it. And it might not always be the most effective strategy for every property in that moment. And it takes a lot of energy to dial it in. That's all, right? And so you're going to go with what works. Because it'll feel like you're nickel and diming your own time just to dig into a 120 unit property in this one state, in this one suburb. It's a lot of energy to spend for just to save a few bucks, and hopefully we can create the support that we can help do that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, you kept talking about juice in the squeeze. I can't remember if that was while we were recording or not, but that's what just keeps striking me is like, as you said, it's like if you have a $2,000 budget, how much do you really should you dig into that like right now versus some of those other line items like the locators or whatever, where maybe there's other savings. Yeah, well, I definitely have a couple follow-ups offline with you. One with that, and then 2 other data sets that I think would be interesting for your model. So we'll connect after. I know we got to let you go. Is there anything else that you want to cover or say before we wrap up?
No, I didn't get very many opportunities to ask questions, and I have a ton, and so we can follow up online. But yeah, I was just curious to how a marketing campaign, right? And I appreciate also that you guys probably try to stay out of this, and you could. So if I'm asking you something that you recognize you're trying to stay out of, that's okay too. But that line between marketing and website, so there is a lot of energy that can be spent building out the website and that engagement, like whether the engagement's occurring after they hit your homepage and beyond versus the front end of the search where people are, really filtering out their needs and wants. And when they get to the website, they're already down to their 3 or 5 or 10 decisions, right? And do you have data points or any expertise or anything to share on the value of that front end search versus the value of kind of that energy spent on websites?
Yeah, well, that's super interesting. We have some there, but there's more that we're getting into. So what you're starting to talk about when you talk about the website is conversion rate optimization. So you have your website and you set it up with like, oh, let's put a number at the top of the page and let's put a form fill here. But as you really get into what they call CRO, you're getting into changing the imagery, like the colors, the copy, and you're running. And then eventually what you actually get into is personalizing even the copy on the site per visitor that comes in. And so this is something that happens with major, of course, like with the Amazons and the Walmarts, but now the technology is starting moving downstream where you can, just where you can start to get in very, very inexpensively. So we've got some tests running with websites that are coming up this quarter. The problem with it for us has frankly been that we are more the lead generation paid media side. So it's kind of like how Reed was talking about, like the retention side. We don't get to play with retention because people just don't think of marketing in that way. And when it comes to this, people think about like their website and branding as being separate from their lead generation. And so we've been able to optimize the hell out of the front end, right? Like getting people to the site, but we haven't really been given the keys as much to change what the experience is for the user once they're on the site. So, anyways, we have some minor data points there with with little stuff around conversion points on the site. But what I'm excited to get into next is, I'm sure you guys would be willing to help us with some of this, but is being given the latitude to start running more personalized tests with the folks once they hit the site. And there's some limitations there with the CMSs, but there's some technologies you can drop on top of the site, like VWO or Write Message or I mean, there's a dozen of them now that can help you do that like at scale through just a pixel on the site. So I guess more to come there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think like other industries are doing it, right? Like if I go to a certain website and I'm always clicking on whatever the SUV, if I go to that website again, homepage is going to show me SUVs, right? It doesn't show me all of a sudden the convertibles on the beach are out of the picture, and now they're showing me SUVs falling over rocks. So it seems like some value anyways.
Yeah, sorry. You'll see that with like the major third-party websites like Graystar.com that personalizes as you get there. What it doesn't do, at least as far as I know, and what this industry doesn't do is, let's say that you go to the website the first time. You should have a different experience than if you made it to the one-page floor plan page and then contacted you. If someone, after they contact you and they come back to your site, you already know that they're interested in a one floor plan. And frankly, you know that they've contacted you, right? So you should be able to match that up with your CRM and say, okay, what part of the lead cycle is this visitor in? Okay, let me do something with that, as opposed to treating them like they're brand new. I mean, the worst part, the very clear example here is if someone's a current resident and they come to your site, you don't want to show like we're now giving 2 months free and $1,000 move-in special, right? That's very, very low-hanging fruit and is totally achievable. So I think there's some very quick wins here with some pretty small technology integrations that can be done, and then after that, you can start getting way more personalized.
Yeah, I was going to throw out one of my hot takes. David often asks that, and I don't think we'll have time to get at that with you, Aaron. And from defining that quickly, just where we kind of see it again, we go against the grain, what most people believe. And for me, when it comes to, and this just connects to what you guys were just talking about, like the kind of the initial search and the value, and then what happens on the site. But we didn't talk a whole lot about ILSs, but my general stance on that is actually that you want to be harder to find. You were mentioning, hey, if nobody knows that you're doing $200 like concession, then there's not much value in it, which I don't disagree with, but I liken it, and have for a while now, to online dating. Like if you say that you're just interested in I'll say guys that are 6 feet tall and have college degrees, you're going to get a gazillion hits, right? But if you add a bunch of other interests, characteristics, then you're more likely to get a better match, but you're not going to get the same volume. So it's the same thing with marketing and with the quality of the leads that come in. And so, my belief, especially on the ILSs, but at large, is that you go as lean and wide as you can. So you do want to cast that wide net, but in a way, you want to be harder to find because technology now has advanced such that you can put in all sorts of criteria, certainly in your search when you look at the different keywords that are flowing in and out of Google. But then the same is true with all these different ILSs, is hardly anyone just goes in there and starts browsing. They put how much they want to spend, what neighborhood, whether they have pets, etc. And by the time they do that, suddenly there's a lot less properties that they're looking at. And the good news is that if you were smart about your marketing and started with a lower level package, then the only way that they probably came up to you was you're a good match. And so there's a better chance you're going to convert. So if you take that approach kind of more broadly, then I think you can still get a good amount of leads. I'm not saying necessarily enough, but then you started with the most prescriptive, highest converting strategy campaign that you could put together, and then you ladder up the budget as necessary. So I think that's a huge part of the marketing equation. Will just say that most of the folks we work with don't see it that way. They're too consumed with, we got to have a diamond, it's super competitive here, or we know we got to spend this budget. It's like, I personally, would always start with that lean and wide and work my way up from there.
I love that. And that is just like a quick pick of like all the exchanges I've had with your team at Digible, like just helping me peel back the layers of this onion. Like I said, there are a lot of things, a lot of opportunities still left to learn, but it also sounds like there are things changing every day. And thanks for being in the game with us.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this is a blast, Aaron. You had me think of so many things I hadn't really put thought to, particularly about that total life cycle of the resident. We've talked about it before, but the way that you started to talk through it gave me some ideas about how we can help change that on the marketing side. Just as you said, like it's the total sales experience, right? It's like from the first time they see and hear of you versus to when they move in and what the setup there is. So anyways, just really I have appreciated the conversation, and I'll put you on the spot here. I feel like you should gather those questions, and then we should have you back on like in a month or so or whatever, and you can do kind of a reverse like gotcha on us, just to see if you can squeeze us and make us trimmer.
Well, you
absolutely will.
David, I have to ask my most serious question. They also ask on every interview, so I'm going to ask Aaron this, and then that'll be a wrap. If you had one meal to eat, or last meal, I should say, what would that be? And then if you were stuck on an island eating the same meal for the rest of your life, what would that be?
Any point in time on any day, including when I'm sleeping, if you offered me a taco or a Dr. Pepper, I wouldn't say no.
That's awesome.
So is it the same for both? If you had to eat it your last meal or forever, it's a taco and a Dr. Pepper?
I mean, I might be choosy on which one comes first, but yeah, the answer is yes.
That's awesome.
Wow. Well, now I know. We found out ahead of the episode that Aaron is also an ultra runner like myself. And so now when I crew you, hopefully over there at Western States, Aaron, we can, I won't be feeding you gels, but I'll be feeding you some Dr. Peppers and tacos.
Dr. Peppers to the finish line. I like it.
All right, Aaron. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Great, David. Thank you guys.